Hi everybody, welcome to At Home with Gigi. I'm Gwen. Thank you so much for stopping by. I truly appreciate it. I can't wait to share with you today some beautiful rustic patriotic DIYs, and it's part of a collaboration that's hosted every month on the first day of the month, and I'll tell you more about that in just a bit. But for right now, let's go ahead and get started with these gorgeous DIYs. As you can see, this sign has seen better days, but that's okay. We're going to flip it over and we're going to give the other side 2 coats of Waverly chalk paint in the color Snow White. Once the base coat is dry, I'm taping off the top of the mason jar, and then I'm going to go in with the color Admiral Blue from Apple Barrel, and I'm just going to give that top part 2 coats. Now I am going to go around the outside edges of the jar and paint it the same color blue, and I'll explain more about that in just a bit. I'm not being too careful because it's going to be covered up with the picture, and you'll see what I mean in just a bit. We're going to add stars to the top of our jar, and I'm going to be using this well-loved stencil, and this came from Amazon. I've had it for forever. If I can find something similar to it, I'll link it down below for you. And I've taped down the bottom. I don't know why I didn't tape the sides, y'all. I just wasn't thinking, I guess. Anyway, I'm just offloading the excess paint. I want to try to prevent as much bleeding as possible, and I'm using the color Snow White again from Waverly chalk paint. And as you can see, this is sped up, but I'm taking my time and just going straight up and down to try and prevent as much bleeding and smudging as I can. I did have some smudging because, again, I didn't tape down the sides completely, but this is kind of a rustic, vintagey vibe going on here with this piece, so I'm okay with that. But if it's going to bother you, you will want to be extra careful and make sure you tape down all sides of your stencil. Now I'm adding a very healthy amount of Mod Podge to the front of this jar, and you're going to want to make sure that you smooth it out because you don't want any lumps or bumps, because we're going to be using the iron-on method to adhere our picture. And I'm just, like you see, I'm smoothing it out in one direction, and then I'm going to go crossways, just making sure I've got the whole surface covered, because I really want to make sure my sign or picture is going to adhere. Once it's dry, we're going to come in with our picture, and I'm using this calendar from 2022, and I just love this page. It says Land That I Love, and I'm just going to use my X-Acto knife to get a really good cut across the bottom because I have torn too many pages by just ripping them out. Off camera, we did remove the very top of the calendar page just to make it fit a little better up under what I call the lid. Thank you, honey, for doing that. I can't cut a straight line to save my life, and I'm just lining it up as best I can there, making sure Hawaii and Alaska is going to be on the mason jar. And I'm placing a sheet of parchment paper over the top of the calendar page because we're going to be using my iron to adhere this page to the mason jar. And this is my absolute favorite way to decoupage. If you watch my videos, you know this already, but I like to start in the center of my project and just work my way out from there, just making sure I'm smoothing out any air pockets that might be up under there, and just work my way all the way around my surface. And what this does, it reactivates that Mod Podge and causes your calendar page, in this instance, or whatever you might be using, to adhere to your board or whatever you're decoupaging on. And 99% of the time you get a perfect finish. And then I'll just use a combination of my scissors and the sanding block just to remove the excess paper. I told you earlier I would explain why I painted around the edges of the mason jar, and this is the reason why. This page is more of a, as you can see, off-white kind of tan color, and I didn't want the outer rim to be stark white. And also it had another reason. As I'm sanding here, it's removing some of that paint and giving it a little bit of a rustic kind of distressed look. Now this piece I'm not going to heavily distress. I'm loving it how it's turning out. You'll see in another DIY coming up, so stay tuned for that. I do heavily distress that one, but this one I can't wait for y'all to see it. I just absolutely love it. I want to add just a few embellishments to the front of the mason jar, and we're going to be using this little tiny heart, and I don't know if you can see, but we've already drilled a little hole right in the center, and we're going to be using 3 beads, 2 round ones and 1 square. And I'm going to go ahead and give each of them a coat of the antiquing wax from Folk Art. But before it's completely dry, I'm going to go in with Crimson and Snow White from Waverly, and then the Admiral Blue from Apple Barrel, and I'm going to give each of them a coat of paint. And the reason I'm doing this, I don't want the paint to be really bright and vibrant, because I'm going for a more rustic-y vintage look. And as you can see by the heart here, it just, to me, it just turns out perfect. It gives it more of that aged look and just not so bright and in your face. Now I should have used a different white instead of the Snow White for the white bead, because it was still just a little too bright for my taste anyway. So when I finished painting it, while it was still damp, I just grabbed a baby wipe and just went around the edges and just removed some of that paint. Okay, y'all, I made a boo-boo. I forgot to turn the camera back on. As you can see, I've already hot glued the twine that we're going to wrap around the lid of the jar to the back of the sign. And I threaded the 3 beads and the heart onto a shorter piece of twine, and then just knotted that in the corner there to the long piece of twine. I hope that's clear. And then I'm just going to take and snip off that excess twine right there, and I'm going to use just a little bit of super glue to keep that twine from unraveling or the knot from coming undone. And then once it's dry, I'm going to pull just a little bit, and that knot will pop right down inside the hole of that bead and completely hide it. And then I'm just going to wrap the rest of the twine around the lid and then just attach it at the very back with a little more hot glue. As you can see, I also covered the back of the sign where it looked so ugly, where I'd torn off the pieces and used them for other projects. I just used brown wrapping paper that you pick up at the Dollar Tree, cut it down to size, and just used the iron-on method for that. And you can see it gives it such a nice, clean finish. I'm just making a quick, messy bow. Some of it's from Michael's, some from Dollar Tree, some from Walmart. And as always, I make my bows way, way, way too big, and I'm just going to go in and trim that down quite a bit, and just to make it fit a little bit better on the top. And as I was making the bow, I'm looking at the sign and I'm like, it just really needs something else. And if you watch my videos, you know I love to add beads to a project. It's just my thing. So I decided to make a handle for the top of the sign just out of some beads that I had on hand, and hot glued that to the sign. And then I'm just using a little piece of ribbon just to cover up the string or the twine at the back, just to make it look a little bit better. All that's left to do is just hot glue the bow to the front of the sign, and we're going to call this project finished. This was just such a fun and fast little project to do, and y'all, everything that I've used I had on hand except for 2 of the ribbon, and that was the dark blue with the stars and then the little red, white, and blue ribbon, and that came from Walmart. But I am trying to be so good this year and use up a lot of my stash. But isn't this jar just absolutely adorable? Now we're going to make a very quick and easy patriotic sign using this home sign. I've already painted it, as you can see. I did that sometime last year, so I don't have that footage, but I believe I used Waverly chalk paint in the color white. And I've just tried to put my painter's tape in the center as best I can, and we're going to paint the top half of this with Waverly chalk paint in the color crimson. As I mentioned earlier, this video is part of a collaboration, and this collaboration takes place on the first day of each month at 6 p.m. Eastern Time and is hosted by Brenda at Rustic and Lace DIY. And this month she has a guest host, and that's Robin from Crafts Unleashed by Robin. I'll have their channels along with that playlist down in my description box as always. So make sure you go and say hello to these wonderful ladies and make sure you check out the playlist. I promise you, you will get so inspired by all these beautiful patriotic DIYs. If you're here from the playlist, a great big welcome to you. Thank you so much for stopping by. I truly hope that you'll take a moment and hit that subscribe button and become part of my YouTube family. Now I did bring the red paint over just a little too far onto the heart because we're going to be decoupaging a napkin onto the heart, and I didn't want the red to show through the napkin, so off camera I did go back and correct that, and I just kind of taped it off once it was good and dry and just went over it with some white paint. Y'all, isn't this napkin beautiful? I picked them up last year from Hobby Lobby, and we're only going to be using this one little square out of this whole big old napkin, so I'll save it for a later project. And I'm just cutting it out as best I can because we're going to decoupage this onto our heart. I've already added a layer of Mod Podge to the heart, let that dry, and I'm just going to go ahead and remove this second ply. Some napkins have 3, this one only had 2. And I'm going to go ahead and line this up as best I can along that E. I want it to have a very clean, crisp line there, and I'm just going to kind of hold it in place until I get my parchment paper placed because I don't want my napkin to move. And I'm just going to kind of speed through this next part. You just saw me do this in the previous DIY, so I don't want to bore you too much, but see how perfect that turns out. I just absolutely love it, and I just used my little tiny scissors and the nail file just to remove that excess napkin. You know, this really was such a very fast and easy little DIY, and it would be just such a wonderful addition to your hutch or something like that for the upcoming Memorial Day and 4th of July. I just love it. Y'all tell me what you think about it. We're going to create this beautiful vintage sign that was inspired by a photo I saw on Pinterest, and we're going to be using this cube from Hobby Lobby, and I literally paid $1.19 for this. I've removed all the labels and the stickers, and we're going to give it 2 coats of Waverly chalk paint in the color truffle. We're going to be creating the crackle effect on this box, and I'm putting a very generous layer of school glue. I just happen to have Elmer's on hand, but you can really use any brand of school glue, and it is a very generous layer, and I'm just going to go ahead and smooth all of that out. Now I am just as messy with glue as I am with Mod Podge, and as you can see I've got some over the sides. I'll just go back and clean that up with a baby wipe, and I'm loading up both sides of my paintbrush with paint because I want to try and make one trip all the way down, one stripe all the way down at one time without going back and forth over it. I don't always do that. The idea is it will lessen your crackle effect if you keep mixing the glue and the paint together. I wasn't thinking and did that in a couple of sections, so my crackle effect is not as good as it could have been. Now I set this aside and let it dry and went on and did other projects, and then I came back once it was dry to the touch, and I'm going to repeat the process on two of the sides. Again, I'll set it aside, work on other things, and let that dry. Then I'll come back and complete the other 2 sides. Now some people I've seen go in with a blow dryer heat gun just to speed up the process. If you want to do that, that's fine. I was crafting all day anyway, so I just set it aside each time and let it air dry. But if you don't have time for that, of course, blow dryer, heat gun, whatever you prefer to speed it up. We're going to add America the Beautiful to the front of our sign, and I printed this off just on a cheap inkjet printer, and I'm putting it in my oven on 200 degrees for about 10 minutes to set the ink. I've never had any issues with putting paper in the oven, but for safety reasons you will want to keep an eye on it. We're going to be decoupaging the song to the front of our sign, so this next part is strictly optional, but If you want your paper to have the consistency or be as thin as a napkin or tissue, then place it face down, and I'm doing it just on my tabletop, and I'm going to add strips of tape all the way down and just really smooth them out. And then I'm going to go back one by one and just peel it back, but I will caution here, do it very slowly or you'll tear your paper. As you can see, it's lifting up that back part of the paper, and to me it's just so satisfying to watch that. But as you can see, it's just really making your paper thin. Again, this is just strictly optional, or it will be like the thickness of scrapbook paper. So whatever you prefer, but I love to do this. It is, to me, so much fun. To remove the excess paper around the song, I'm just using a paintbrush, a little small paintbrush, and some water, and I'm just going around the edges and just removing a little bit at a time. You can always go back and remove more, but I want it again to look weathered and worn, and this is one of my favorite ways to remove excess paper when I'm decoupaging. I love the uneven edges and texture that it gives. It just wasn't looking weathered and worn enough for me, so I'm just going to crush it up and just kind of squish it between my hands. Now, this is a little bit sped up. I'm doing it pretty slow, so I don't want to tear my song. I guess it wouldn't be the end of the world if you did. It would just make it look a little more weathered and worn, but, we don't want to tear it. We've worked on it too hard, right? And then I'm just going to smooth it back out a little bit, and then we're going to use some Mod Podge and go ahead and attach it to the front of the sign. I'm going to center it up as best I can, and once I get it to exactly where I want it, I'm just going to hold it in place. I don't know about y'all, but I am forgetful, and if I pick it up and move it and then add my Mod Podge, then I got to start all over again trying to get everything centered. So I've just found that it's easier to just hold my paper, napkin, whatever I'm decoupaging in place, and then just work from there. Now, this is one time I don't mind the wrinkles, but I'm going to be using the plastic wrap to kind of help smooth out and just get any excess Mod Podge or bubbles that might be up under there. Again, I don't mind the wrinkles, but it just seemed to be smoothing everything out, and I'm like, gah! Of course, when I want the wrinkles, I can't get the wrinkles, but oh well, what are you going to do? Once I've finished smoothing out the sheet of music, I'm going to go back around the edges with another layer of Mod Podge just to make sure I've got a really good seal and none of those edges are going to come back up. Once the Mod Podge is dry, I'm going to go in with Folk Arts Antiquing Wax and a chippy brush from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to start by just brushing over the entire piece and just gradually building it up and just trying to get that distressed, vintage rustic look that I'm going for. It just still is not happening, at least to me. So I accidentally put too much antiquing wax on one end, and I grabbed my wipe, was wiping some of it away, and it started rubbing away the paint, and I'm like, bingo, that's what I'm looking for. So I just continued all the way around the piece, just randomly removing paint. In some spots I had to do a little bit of rubbing and scrubbing to get some of that paint off, but you'll have to tell me what you think when you see the final result at the end. But I think that was just exactly the right touch and what it needed. Off camera, I've gone ahead and covered the back with some brown wrapping paper from the Dollar Tree, and we're going to be adding this window cling, and I believe this is also from the Dollar Tree. I picked it up last year, so it's either Dollar Tree or Walmart. I'm sorry, I just don't remember. And we're just going to be placing it there in the center of the song. I didn't really like how the plastic looked around the edges of the flag, so I'm just going to go in and just trim that up real quick, and then we're going to attach it with some Mod Podge. I'm going to go in with the layer of Mod Podge and just put that directly on the back of the window cling. That way I can control exactly where it's going. And then I'm going to center it up as best I can. Once I have the flag exactly where I want it, I'm going to use some plastic wrap and just smooth over the flag, getting out any air bubbles or excess Mod Podge that might be up under it. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to take another sheet of plastic wrap and place it over the entire flag and use my brayer and just kind of roll back and forth. I really want this flag to look like it's a part of the sheet of music, not like I've just thrown it on top. Then I'm just going to go back over everything with another layer of Mod Podge, and this is to help seal everything in, and it will also help take away that plastic look of the flag and just make it look like it's actually a part of the sheet of music. I went back and forth, could not decide if I actually wanted to make a bow or just leave it without a bow. I love it both ways, but y'all going to tell me what you preferred, with the bow or without the bow. If you've enjoyed my video today, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, and the thumbs up, and leave me a comment. It sure does help my channel to grow, and it's an absolutely free way to support my channel, and it would just mean everything to me. Brenda, Robin, thank you so much for hosting this wonderful challenge and allowing me to be a part of it. I'll have the playlist linked down in the description box for your convenience. Make sure you go and tell everybody I said hello. And if you're here from the playlist, again, a great big welcome to you, and thank you so much for being here.